What's more powerful, meat is medicine or sugar is poison?
I tend to go with the positive, message.
How about I'm positive sugar is poison?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
What about breakfast, man? The most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
Is it really?
A marketing slogan developed by the Kellogg's Corporation to sell their breakfast cereal. If you are going to eat it, it's also a great opportunity. Bacon and eggs.
The chicken was committed. The pig was dedicated.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't even imagine how many times you've heard your name butchered.
There are a couple of versions of it.
Which one do you prefer?
So the interesting thing is my family has always pronounced it Ovadia, but Ovadia is the technically correct way to pronounce it.
Ovadia.
Yeah.
That's rather British almost.
Yeah, it's the Hebrew pronunciation of it, but yeah, I always go Ovadia, but I usually don't worry about Ovadia when people say it.
I'm going to defer to what you do because you would know. You're Dr. Philip Ovadia, and I really appreciate you coming up here from Florida to spread the word, because that seems to be the thing, man. You're on such a mission, and I'll just tell you very briefly how you wore me down from a distance. It started with our friend Vinny Tortorich, who just thinks the world of you. So we got your book. And Chuck, weren't you going through some sort of cholesterol drama?
Yeah, I met with Dr. Ovadia to teleconference,
Yeah, and that was like a year and a half, year ago?
I think 2 years ago, yeah. And I still have the cholesterol medicine that my doctor prescribed, the full bottle sitting in my nightstand.
That you never took?
That I never took, yes.
Interesting. So that happens. So like Chuck's in my life and Vinny's in my life. And then my dad, Christmas before, had a heart attack and very nearly didn't make it out. He wound up with a stent in like the main vein, and he's 93 and he's hanging tough. But that just made me once again, it's like, oh, God, this heart business. And then a dear friend of mine who I went to school with is one of your patients, and she spoke so highly of you. And so I just thought, okay, I picked up your book and went through it, and I want to get to as much of it as you want to get to, but I think I just want to start with the point that if you're looking for a credible source of information, for me, I'm much less impressed with the initials after your name these days than I am with the fact that you've actually performed over 3,000 heart surgeries and that you lost 100 pounds yourself. Based on those bona fides, it's great to see you. And how's the mission going?
Yeah, the mission remains the primary driving reason that I do what I do. 750,000 Americans are going to die of heart disease this year. Every 33 seconds, someone has a heart attack. And what really bothers me, I would say most now as a heart surgeon, is this has been going on for 70 years. We declared war on heart disease in 1955, and quite frankly, we are losing that battle. Heart disease continues to get worse, and I look around and ask why. Because what's ironic is when I was deciding what type of surgeon to become, right? I was in the early part of my training, and I was doing, what we call general surgery, and I was learning about all the different, types of surgery that you can do.
Where'd you study, by the way?
That was in New Jersey, Robert Wood Johnson, after graduating from Jefferson Medical College. And I was talking to my mentors, and I said, I love heart surgery. I love the technical aspects of it. I love the physiology. I love taking care of the heart.
You loved it before you actually did it?
Well, while I was doing,
okay.
When I got exposed to it. And then I was deciding, I said, I want to go into heart surgery. And they said, Phil, please don't. That would be the worst thing you can do. This is early 2000s. Statins are the most widely prescribed class of medication. And they say, heart disease is figured out. There's going to be nothing for you to do in 20 years as a heart surgeon. You're going to be out of a job. Go into anything else. Don't do that. Well, here we are 25 years later. There is a shortage of heart surgeons in this country currently. There aren't enough heart surgeons to do all the heart surgery that needs to be done.
Is it a shortage of heart surgeons or a plethora of patients?
Mike, I wish more people in the medical field asked exactly that question. Because you're right, it's not a shortage of surgeons, it's too many people with heart disease, with this advanced stage of heart disease that ends up needing heart surgery.
And what is that advanced stage called technically?
So the main form of heart disease we deal with is what's called atherosclerotic heart disease. It's the gradual buildup of plaque in the arteries that can ultimately lead to heart attacks, and it is the most common thing that kills people. And it is, in my mind, entirely preventable.
Before we get to prevention, can you just riff for a minute on the certainty with which your profession seems so enamored? Going back to that period of time, all right, it's 26 years ago, and it's not some random people that advised you. It's your mentors. It's the people you look up to and respect. And don't take this the wrong way, but where in the world has the humility gone from the medical profession?
Yeah, again, it's a great question, right? And, as a physician, if you're treating a condition and that condition isn't getting better, right? The individual patient in front of you is not getting better, or the collective with this condition is not getting better, you should take a step back and you should say something's wrong here. Now, the problem is, specifically when it comes to heart disease, we have been so convinced that cholesterol is the singular cause of heart disease that there's just no one asks these questions. Everyone says, well, we know that cholesterol is a cause of heart disease, and if heart disease isn't getting better as we lower patients' cholesterol with dietary changes, pharmaceuticals, whatever it might be, the answer must be that people aren't listening to us enough. We're not lowering it enough. We're not starting early enough. The latest, sort of recommendations that have come out of the American Heart Association is we should be testing 10-year-olds for their cholesterol level and starting them on medication if they have what is considered now to be high cholesterol. And it's insanity. It's what Einstein said, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's where we are when it comes to heart disease. And that's why we're not making progress. And it's getting worse.
It's smart people making this mistake.
Yeah.
It's not the dummies. It's not the uneducated. It's not the people that aren't. It's our experts. I think, Doc, the thing that most baffles me about all of this, and I'm still trying to stay at the 30,000-foot level, what do we do when experts can't agree? What's the average person to do? We were kind of joking off camera, but it's like there's just an endless fire hose of information out there on every single topic. If you give me a topic, it seems like I can give you a consensus, and I can give you a contrarian view, and I can populate the entire argument with really credible experts who are very, very sure.
Yep.
What are we to make of this?
Well, I think increasingly, the more convinced that the experts seem about something, the more we should question it, right?
Wow. Amen.
And, cholesterol, for me, right, has been the original story around this. But again, it's the same narrative that we have now seen played out many different aspects of health.
Is it because narratives are stories and stories need villains? Did we assign the villainous role to cholesterol to the point where we're afraid to walk it back? Never mind. It's not just a question of, oh, wait a second, maybe it's not the villain. It's really like, oh, maybe it's the hero.
Exactly. And, specifically when we start talking about things like red meat, that is exactly the conclusion that I have now come to, right? Not only is red meat not harmful for our heart and our overall health, it is essential. I now go around telling people as a heart surgeon that meat is medicine. We need meat in our diets, and this is one of the things we talk about in the new book. But on my charitable days, I just say, well, it's that institutional groupthink that we've gotten trapped in, right?
Yeah.
And if you're an organization like the American Heart Association and you've spent 70 years telling people that cholesterol is the main cause of heart disease, and you've put billions, maybe trillions of dollars at this point into research around cholesterol as the cause of heart disease, saying, I think we made a mistake, I think we were wrong, is very hard for large institutions like that. And we know that ultimately the only way that happens is when the institution basically gets destroyed and some other, institution can replace it with a better idea. And I'm optimistic that we're starting to get to that point. I'm optimistic that the patients out there are getting fed up enough. And I even start to see it among my colleagues, right? Because everyone talks about, we have this problem with doctors getting burnt out. And what I see is doctors aren't burnt out because they don't like being doctors. Doctors are burnt out because their patients are not getting better. And again, heart disease ends up being the main focus of this because it is the number one killer. It's been the number one killer. And like I said, in my mind, 70 years later, for something that we declared war on, right, and we put all these resources into, and it's not getting better, that's where doctors and patients now need to come together and say, we need a different approach. We need to make it so it's not the number one killer anymore. And that's the mission I'm on.
I don't want to gloss over the stakes or the scope. 750,000 people are going to die this year.
Yep.
Is there anything more lethal that we're looking at in terms of disease?
No single condition. And if you add up number 2 and number 3, it still doesn't quite match number 1.
What are 2 and 3?
Cancer is number 2. For a while, COVID was between number 2 and 3. And oh, by the way, all that time that we had the daily ticker on the news about how many people are dying today of COVID, it was half of the people that died of heart disease at COVID's peak.
Was that your first thought when you saw that ticker?
That was exactly my first thought. Like, where's our heart disease ticker? Why hasn't it been on the news for the past 20 years? Because, again, the numbers are much bigger. And all of these things, heart disease remains number 1, and nothing has come close to it.
America's skills gap isn't a mystery. It's just a reflection of what we value. And for decades, we valued a 4-year degree way more than a trade school education. That's why we took shop class out of high school and told a whole generation of kids they were screwed if they didn't get a 4-year degree. Well, that was dumb. Now we got $1.7 trillion of student loans on the books and millions of good jobs that don't require a 4-year degree. I'm talking about AI-proof 6-figure jobs in the trades, electricians and plumbers and welders and shipbuilders and linemen. They're in demand like never before. Over at MicroWorks, we're trying to close the skills gap by offering work ethic scholarships to men and women who want to get the training that's necessary to do the jobs that are in demand. What a concept. We've been at it for 17 years. This is going to be our biggest year yet. The money is real. You should go get some at microworks.org. Learn a skill that's in demand. And have a nice day.
Why do you reckon there's no ticker on Fox or CNN or MSNBC?
I reckon these days that it's not, because the food and the pharmaceutical industries that are the main supporters of TV don't really want those results publicized. They don't really want people thinking about, well, we changed our whole food approach, right? We released dietary guidelines in 1980 that were targeted against heart disease. We developed all these medications, starting in the mid to late 1980s and accelerating, up until today. And we're failing. It's still number 1. Again, a logical person steps back and says, this doesn't add up. There's got to be something wrong here.
It's so calcified. I feel like you're trying to grab the country by the lapels and just shake it. And then, like that scene in Airplane, just give us a slap and say, look, you just have to step back from everything you think you know. It's a peripeteia. It's that moment of realization where it's like, good grief, to have something so fundamental be so fundamentally incorrect. So I saw you lecture once. You were talking to a room full of doctors. And I I think you just you said, listen, let me tell you about the zombies in the room. And just described, in your opinion, this state that a lot of really brilliant, successful doctors have devolved into, where all they can do is repeat these talking points that I think you actually just said it out loud is killing their patients.
When I say things like that, right, it comes from a place of understanding, because I was one of those zombies, right? My origin story with all of this goes back, 10 years now, right? So I was 15 years into a career as a heart surgeon, right? I was a very busy heart surgeon. I was a successful heart surgeon, but I was a morbidly obese, pre-diabetic heart surgeon. And I kind of looked around one day. I know you.
I'm putting myself, like I'm on the gurney.
Yeah.
I'm being wheeled in.
Yeah.
And this guy that's 100 pounds on the wrong side of healthy walks in and
Exactly.
says, okay, it's all going to be great.
And you know what? Not one of my colleagues during that time ever said to me, like, Phil,
physician,
what are
heal
you doing?
thyself.
And because quite frankly, a lot of them were in a similar situation. But I looked around and I said, I'm going to end up on my own operating table. And I don't know what to do about it. Because all that advice that I've been giving people, right, that I was taught to give, it doesn't work. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for them. So what do we do here, right? And thankfully, I was in one of those big lectures. I was at a meeting of heart surgeons. And there was a guest speaker that year by the name of Gary Taubes. And Gary is an investigative journalist, a scientific investigative journalist, and he had just written a book called The Case Against Sugar. And before that, he had written another book called Good Calories, Bad Calories, and Why We Get Fat. And Gary started talking about it's not how much food you're eating, right? It's not about eat less. It's about the types of food that you're eating and something called insulin resistance and the metabolic syndrome. Right. And I kind of thought back to medical school and I said, I think I heard that maybe mentioned once or twice, but no one's ever said anything about it in relation to heart disease. But it makes sense. Let me give this a try. Right. And I started cutting sugar out of my diet and I got more broad and started cutting most carbohydrates out of my diet. And I lost 100 pounds and I started eating more meat. Right?
Over what period of time?
Over about a year, I would say.
That's a
year
lot.
to a year and a half, and it was a lot. And, that's 10 years ago, right? And understand, I had lost weight before, but you know how it goes. You
Sure.
lose the 50 pounds and you gain 75. And this was the first time that I was able to sustain it. And I started looking more into this. And I said, why did I learn about this from, and no offense to Gary, and I've told him this to his face, I said, why did I learn about this from an investigative journalist? And I didn't learn about it from any of my mentors, any of my colleagues.
People ask me all the time, why did I learn more about my diet from a celebrity trainer named Vinnie Tortorich?
Yeah, exactly.
Why didn't my doctor sit me down? Like, where's the proactive outreach from the medical community?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and so one thing leads to another because you say, well, if what they taught me was wrong about obesity, maybe what they taught me was wrong about heart disease. And low carb diets invariably bring up that question because you start eating more fat, you start eating more red meat. Some people see their cholesterol levels go up. Some people don't, by the way, but and then you start saying, well, okay, is this going to lead to heart disease? And that's the number one question I get when we talk about low carb diets. Everyone's like, well, I can't eat all that fat. I can't eat all that red meat. It's going to, everything else might get better, right? Your diabetes has gotten better. Your blood pressure is lower. You're off 10 medicines. And I've had patients literally, they've gotten off 10 medicines and they go back to their doctors and the doctor says, well, what are you doing? And they tell them, and they look at that one number on that one blood test and they say, you can't keep doing that. It's going to kill you. Even though everything in their life has gotten better. But doctors are so convinced that cholesterol is the cause of heart disease that they can't imagine that the fact that their cholesterol level, this patient's cholesterol level may have gone up a bit. Even though they're off 10 medications, they've reversed diabetes, all this other stuff gets better, and the patient still gets scared and may stop doing that diet that has had this benefit just because of this misconception about what role cholesterol plays in heart disease.
I just come back to story and how desperate we are to have a narrative that we can follow with a good guy and a bad guy and a couple of plot twists, but nothing too complicated. And whether you're, just trying to live a healthy life without becoming an expert in the field, or just a parent trying not to screw up their kid, right? So I'm going to send you to college, even though you might not be wired for it, even though we might not be able to afford it, even though you don't even know what you want to study. I'm going to do this thing because it's so inculcated, right? And then calcified. I just see such a parallel with it. And I'm also really struck, the whole cholesterol debate and lipids, and it's been around a long time.
Long time.
Like a century and a half, maybe? People have been talking about this?
Yeah, the original theories around, cholesterol and heart disease go back to the 1930s, 1940s, really came to a head in the 1950s is when we got on this narrative of cholesterol is the cause of heart disease.
We're taking, I assume, autopsies and going in and we're looking at blood vessels and we're seeing plaque. We're seeing cholesterol that's accumulated and concluding, okay, that's what killed him. But what are we missing when we conclude that?
Yeah, so that's exactly how this started, right? And it makes sense. People die of heart disease. We open up their arteries, we see this waxy stuff called cholesterol in there. We look in the bloodstream of living people, we see cholesterol. We look at some of the foods that we eat, and there's cholesterol in there, right? So you start making the connection. We eat the cholesterol, it goes into our bloodstream. When you have very high levels, which was the initial discovery of cholesterol in the bloodstream, you die more of heart disease. So makes perfect sense. The problem is it's not true. It doesn't quite work that way. One of the favorite analogies I use to explain this is if you're some alien, right, and you're looking down on the earth, and you notice every time there's a house, a structure on fire, there are these firemen standing next to it, right? And so you may say, okay, well, obviously they're the ones that are starting the fires.
Obviously. It's not an explanation. Sure.
Right? And that's what cholesterol is. Cholesterol is actually sent to our blood vessels to repair the damage. Now, it turns out when cholesterol itself becomes dysfunctional, and we might get into talking about insulin resistance, which is what really causes all of this, but the cholesterol comes to repair the damage, and because the cholesterol itself isn't really working like it should, it starts to get stuck there. And then we're doing more and more damage because we have high blood sugar. Maybe we're smoking. We have this insulin resistance problem. And so more and more cholesterol shows up. More and more cholesterol is now stuck in the wall of the blood vessel. And this is where the plaque starts to build up. But it wasn't the cholesterol that started it. It was what damaged your blood vessels. And that's the step that we missed. That's the step that we don't pay enough attention to, that if we can stop the damage to the blood vessels first, if we can make sure that our cholesterol is healthy and working as it should, that's how we're going to stop heart disease.
Well, obviously, what can we do to facilitate that? How can we make our blood vessels healthier?
Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go. Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go. Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go. Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go. Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go.
Now available in rye.
Yeah, so again, what is the number one thing today causing that damage? It's basically high sugar. And it's an underlying condition, again, we call insulin resistance. So insulin, everyone's heard of it. It is the primary hormone that our body uses to keep our blood sugar under control and to regulate basically what happens with energy in our body. And what the problem that we have developed in this society is the number one thing that causes insulin to go up are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates broadly, and specifically when we start talking about processed carbohydrates, sugar and refined flour and these things.
A donut.
It causes our insulin to go up. And when you do that too often, and you're doing that all the time, and again, recommendations came down from the government, the thing called the food pyramid. And the big base of that food pyramid was a load of carbohydrates, right? So we told people stop eating fat because we thought it was bad. And of course, you take something out, you got to put something back in, you put more carbohydrates. And now we got into this situation where people are eating too much carbohydrate, too much refined carbohydrate, and they're eating it all the time. And so the insulin level stays high. And the cells of the body then say, we're not listening to insulin anymore, right? Insulin is always over there yelling at us, and you know what you do. You start tuning that person out.
Yeah.
And so we're not listening to the insulin, and now we have too much sugar in our bloodstream, and that's damaging the blood vessels. And that's the primary thing. It's not the only thing, but it's the primary thing leading to the damage to the blood vessels and also making it so the cholesterol doesn't work properly. So the cholesterol can't just go and repair the damage and then disappear and leave a nice, new smooth wall behind. It goes there to repair the damage. It sets off its own inflammatory reaction. And that's how we start to see all this plaque build up.
How does inflammation underpin metabolic health?
Yeah, so inflammation is one of the hallmarks of poor metabolic health. We start to get inflammation lots of places in our bodies. And that's why, when we're talking about something like diabetes, right, it's not just damage to our blood vessels, it's damage to all of our organs, essentially. And this inflammation is one of the primary drivers of that. So I now tell people we want to focus on 3 I's when it comes to heart disease. We want to focus on insulin resistance. We want to focus on inflammation. And then we want to focus on imaging. And this is another thing that comes back to how we approach heart disease. It's the only real major disease where we're relying on indirect measures of it, right? As much as we want to argue cholesterol is or is not important, cholesterol is not heart disease. The plaque in the arteries is heart disease. So if we really are concerned about heart disease, we should be looking at the plaque in the arteries.
What's the test called?
So the screening test is what's called a coronary artery calcium test. And when I spoke to Chuck a couple of years ago, I said, Chuck, go get this test, right? That's like the mammogram for the heart, and it is severely underutilized. It is a cheap, inexpensive test. You can go get it done for about $100 in most places in this country, and it
What's
takes
entailed? Is it like a
5 minutes?
A scan?
It's a scan. It's a CAT scan, what we call a CT scan. No IV, no dye. You just lay down on the table, run you through the scanner, and it's going to show us plaque, calcified plaque, in the arteries of your heart. And that's the screening test that I now tell every man by the time you're 40, every woman by the time you're 50, you need to get this done. Because treating heart disease in the way we treat it these days is like telling women, don't get mammograms when you feel a lump in your breast, when your breast is hurting you, when you have symptoms. That's when we'll worry about you might have breast cancer. And that would be insane. But that's exactly what we do with heart disease. We say, when you start having symptoms of heart disease, when you have a heart attack,
like it stops
that's when
beating.
most people figure out that they have heart disease.
Yeah. Last couple of years, my folks are older now, and we've been luckily, healthy by and large, but to really get a front row look at, this was Hopkins. This is, my dad was at University of Maryland, I think, and my mom was at Hopkins for her thing. And man, it's just back to the they're so busy. They're so the best of the best are overworked, it just left me feeling more than anything, Doc, like we have to assume a far greater responsibility for our own wellness. We just can't wait for the guy in the white coat. We can't wait for Marcus Welby to make it all better. There's just too much. There are too many mines that we can step on. Sugar, obviously, is a big one. I guess everybody knows smoking. But I don't know. I don't want to gloss over metabolic either. I know that's remedial for you, but so people really understand, like, what is metabolic health? And maybe talk about how, when you don't have it, you become so susceptible to a thing like COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. So metabolic health, the basic, concept is we are giving our body inputs, right? And the primary input we're giving our body is the food that we eat. And metabolic health means that our body is doing what it should do with that food, right? It's using some of the components to build and rebuild our tissue. It's processing the energy that's in that food and using it for, all of the processes that are going on in our body. And there should be some of it that goes into storage, right? Because again, remember historically, as we evolved, the primary problem was we couldn't get enough energy. We couldn't get enough food, right? You had to work hard for food. You had to go hunt down some big beast, or you had to, work the earth and, hope something grows. And oftentimes neither of those things happened, and we didn't have enough food around.
And the uncertainty of not knowing when the next meal is.
Exactly. So you want to have some storage. And then we all of a sudden got into modernity here, and now we have more food than we could ever know what to do with, right? For most people, that has become the primary problem. And when our metabolic health breaks, that balance between storage and utilizing the energy, that's really at a fundamental basis of what goes wrong. And we start storing all of this energy in the form of fat. And the famine never comes. We never use that energy. And getting back to sort of the biochemistry that I talked about earlier, one of the other things that happens when your insulin level increases is that your body is now blocked from accessing that fat. So even though, right, one of the fundamental questions that never really made sense to me is people get overweight. They're walking around literally with millions of calories, right, stored energy on their body, and yet they're hungry all the time. Why is that? Doesn't make sense. But this is part of why insulin resistance explains so much of our problems. Because when insulin is high, your body can't access that body fat. And again, the analogy I use for this, right, is the big tanker truck that's going down the highway carrying the fuel, right, to the gas stations. That can run out of gas, right? Because you have the gas tank that you're actually able to access while you're driving that. And you can't actually access, these millions of gallons, thousands of gallons of fuel that you're carrying around. Right. And that's kind of what starts to happen in our body. We have all the fuel, we just can't use it. We're stuck on burning sugar for energy, right? Because your body knows that sugar is toxic. So when there's sugar in the system, the body's goal is get it out of the bloodstream because we know it's going to damage our blood vessels. And so you get in this loop that you start burning through that sugar. You can't access fat for energy any longer. And so you say, okay, I need more sugar, right? Time to get hungry. Let's go eat more of that, more donuts, more of the processed food.
What was the book called you mentioned? The Sugar?
The Case Against Sugar.
What would it look like if we prosecuted that case? Would you support? I mean, I don't know what Bobby Kennedy's up to at the moment, but he does seem to be pissing a lot of people off by ultimately suggesting a series of ideas that I could see. I don't know that it will happen, but a reasonable person reading your book and looking at the data might wonder why it's legal. Why is it in everything? Why do we permit it? How did that happen? And do you think you can put the crap back in the goose?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I think it ties into a lot of the larger societal questions we're asking these days. But yeah, that question of why did we get here? Because it didn't have to go this way, right? When we go back to the 1950s and we when it was decided, right, that fat, cholesterol, that was the cause of heart disease, there were competing theories. There was a theory that sugar was the primary cause of heart disease back then. And you start to mix some questionable science. Some people would say there was some outright fraudulent studies done. Maybe they were just badly interpreted science, and politics gets involved, right? And money gets involved.
So much money.
And here we are, right? And then you start to see that reinforcing behavior, right? Because anyone who was questioning the narrative on a scientific basis, they start getting, the version then of being deplatformed, delisted, right? You can't get studies that question the cholesterol narrative published in the medical literature. And then so they can stand back and say, look at all this medical literature that supports the cholesterol hypothesis, because they know that anything that goes against it probably isn't going to get studied or get published. And that's where we are.
Well, since we're talking about inflammation, what's the most inflammatory thing you can say that you believe to be true about the consequences of our sugar addiction? For instance, what's killed more people?
Yeah, no, I mean, sugar has...
Or fentanyl.
Way more have died because of sugar excess than fentanyl, than smoking, than anything you really talk about. Because, we've been talking a lot about heart disease. But what we didn't really get into yet is that metabolic disease, insulin resistance, this isn't only about heart disease. Those top 10 causes of death every year in the United States that we, kind of started going down to, 9 out of the 10 of them are due to insulin resistance. So what's been most...
Wait a minute. 9 out of 10?
9 out of 10.
Of the top killers.
Of the top killers.
Are all preceded by insulin resistance.
Correct. And that includes things like psychiatric disorders. We now have this growing field called metabolic psychiatry, where psychiatrists are treating people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, right? These major psychiatric conditions, and they're changing their diet and the condition gets better. So, yeah, 9 out of 10 are due to insulin resistance, and yet when you go to your doctor, the chances that they're ever going to mention insulin resistance to you, the chances that they're going to test you for insulin resistance properly are almost nil. It is very rare. There are...
Wait, I just look. What am I missing now? Why? Like, I understand why a network can't put a ticking clock up on the screen that would indicate the number of sugar-related deaths if the show in question is being sponsored by Captain Crunch and Hershey's and lollipops and down it goes. That tracks, but why wouldn't a doctor? How did your profession become so captured by whatever the answer is to that question?
Yeah, I think the reality for the average doctor is they're just too busy to think about it, right? We've been trained, and to the defense, I guess, of the medical system, right? We are there to take care of sick people, right? You have a heart attack. We can deliver fabulous care today, right? That we couldn't deliver 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So the progress we've seen against heart disease is treating heart disease. It's not in preventing it, right? And you say the same thing for diabetes, right? The average doctor in his office and the patients are just coming in. There's an endless line of people with diabetes. And so you say, okay, how can I most efficiently treat diabetes? It's not really about best. It's most efficiently so I can take care of the most people, right? And it's like, okay, get out the prescription pad, write the prescription, and, it's going to make their diabetes a little better. And doctors truly don't have the time to step back and say, can I make it so not every one of my patients is diabetic anymore? What if I reverse the diabetes and now I don't need to keep seeing that person every couple of months to manage their diabetes? And the sad reality is that doctors don't have the time to think about it. And, if you want to get more into the system, right, the system has actively discouraged doctors from thinking that way.
How?
Right? By saying follow the guidelines, right? We know this is the best way to treat diabetes, for instance. So don't question that, what we're telling you to do isn't actually fixing diabetes, right? This is the best way you can do it. And this is what's most defeating to me as a doctor.
Sure.
Because doctors have been told this is the best we can do, right? The fact that heart disease is still the number one killer, and you're going to put patients on these medications, and a lot of them are still going to have heart attacks, but it's a little bit less than the number that would have had the heart attack if we didn't have the medicine. And that's become the best that we can do anymore. And again, that's another central problem. Doctors don't think big, right? The doctors aren't out there like me saying, instead of, doing a great surgery on, a couple of hundred people that I'm going to operate on every year, what if I kept 100,000 people off the operating table? And there aren't enough big thinkers in the medical world anymore.
Well, no. The internal contradiction you've just opened is you started by saying when you were young and studying, how deeply you fell in love with the heart and working on the heart. And now if you're successful in this mission, you won't be doing any more heart.
Yeah,
surgeries.
I actually ironically hope to prove my mentors wrong, right? Or right, that there'll be nothing left for me to do.
Yeah.
That is the mission I'm on.
What do you think when you're sitting at home, watching the tube, eating something healthy, no doubt, maybe walnuts, perhaps?
A nice big steak.
A nice
most
big
of the
steak.
time.
Okay, so you're just sitting there on your sofa. You're just eating a full-on Fred Flintstone, probably a ribeye, right?
That's
With
right.
a lot of nice
Get
marbling
the
in it.
tomahawk out. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see what I would call just the parade of pharmaceutical ads. I don't even, you can't even lampoon them anymore. A 60-second ad and 45 seconds of it is a disclaimer. They literally have to spend 45 seconds talking about rectal bleeding and strange itching and chafing around my genitals. And I don't understand what's happening, Matt. Everything is unpronounceable. It's a long overdue cure for a condition I didn't know existed. And on the downside, it's going to cause, I don't know, Tourette's or whooping cough or some crazy thing. And it's just one after the next after the next.
Yeah.
And it must be working. It must be working from an advertising standpoint because it's everywhere.
Yeah. So the two things that always strike me on the rare instance I watch TV anymore is it's actually an alternating carousel of ads, right? Because it goes food, pharma, food, pharma, food, pharma,
Oh,
right?
God,
and
right.
that's literally all of it, right?
Right.
And, no one makes that connection. Could it be that food that I'm eating is what's causing me to need all this medication?
I'm thinking of the incredible slow motion, high speed shots of just a hamburger or a piece of pizza, and it's porn basically.
Yeah,
it's food porn.
Yep.
It's so in your face. And if you have I've got a 60-inch TV, high def. And, the best cameras in the world are shooting supermodels eating this stuff in slow motion. And you're so right. The second it's over, some fast-talking guy in a convertible driving into a sunset is telling me something about my pancreas.
Yep. That's where we find ourselves these days. And it's right. You sit back and you just say, this is insanity. How did we get there and how have we not woken up? And I am, like I said, optimistic now because we do have people like Bobby Kennedy who are starting to wake people up, on so many fronts. And we have a new food pyramid, right? And we have a government website.
It's the same pyramid. It's just upside down.
Well, yeah, exactly. And what's so funny about that? I don't know if you've seen, but I now use it in a lot of my talks, right? 15 years ago on South Park, They had this episode where, the Kyle and the kids went on this mission, right, to flip the food pyramid upside down. They're in the mission headquarters of like the FDA, and they're talking about all these people dying. And, Kyle's calling in and saying, you got to flip the food pyramid upside down. And they do that, right? And all of a sudden nutrition like stabilizes.
Right.
And here we are, and again, it's crazy to think that that's how this all played out, right? Because I look at the old food pyramid and I say, if you could not have intentionally designed something better to make people sick, right? And you look at and you say, no one can screw up this badly by incompetence alone. And that's where you start getting into the conspiracy theories, right? And you start saying this had to be intentional. And, I go back and forth on that. But the bottom line is we screwed it up so badly that the only answer was flip it upside down. And it turns out that is the real answer,
And yet we're still so long in certainty in so many other areas. Like that shouldn't, like if we were that colossally wrong about something that fundamental, it just seems like if there's any ability left to think critically, we would go, all right, what else did we miss? But we're not.
Yeah.
What should Kennedy do? Like, really, if you were king of the world, if you were in charge of broadcasting, if you were in charge of the FDA, if you were, if you could turn it all around, walk me through the basic steps that King Ovadia would implement.
Yeah, I mean, I again would start with the basics, right? I start with this fundamental meat is medicine. We need to be eating more meat. Because I'm not big about telling people, restricting them, right? Again, we tried it. It didn't work. Just eat less, right? It doesn't work. What we need to do is focus on what is the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable food to us as human beings. What is that food that is optimally, you can say we've been designed or we've evolved, whatever you want to believe, so that is what our system works best on.
Oh, can I guess?
Let's guess.
Meat.
Meat is medicine. Let's just say it.
Chuck wins.
Meat is medicine. So let's just start there. Tell people, eat all the meat you want. The meat was never the problem. The meat is never going to be the problem. Eat all the meat you want. And when I do that with people, what you start to find is they just start becoming less hungry for the other stuff. You don't have to tell them, well, don't eat all the sugar, right? Because they don't want it. They eat the meat. It is nutrient dense. It is bioavailable. It is what nourishes people. It is what our bodies are looking for. And so let's just start there.
Beef, pork, poultry, all of it?
All of it. All of it.
Fish?
Fish. Yep.
I guess it's meat.
Dairy, the eggs, the animal products in general. It is the protein source that our body has been optimized for, and it is the fat source that our bodies have been optimized for. And if we just get that right, that starts to take down all of the peripheral myths, right? That it's, it's going to drive your cholesterol up and the cholesterol is going to cause heart disease. It doesn't. I have seen it in myself. I have seen it in my patients now, right? I can eat what many people would consider to be obscene amounts of meat, and my health has only gotten better. And it's not just me, I'm not just some wacko out there, with this. We see huge communities now of people that are doing this, and it works. And that's what we need to come back to, right? And people resonate with it because it works.
Yeah. How many of your patients came to you as vegetarians or vegans or just very, very suspect? Like, how do you get somebody over the hump?
Yeah, it's not infrequent anymore that occurs. And in fact, the co-author of my new book, Joshua Lysick, he actually ghost wrote the first book with me. Mm-hmm. And at the time that he ghost wrote the first book, he was a vegan. This is a great story, and
Wow.
we go into it in the new book. And I said, Joshua, you know that I talk a lot about eating meat, right? You're going to be able to write this book for me. He said, don't worry about it. It's your book. I just take care of the writing part. And to his credit, he did an amazing job, and the first book came out great and very well received. And during that period, I said, let me look at your blood work. And I looked at his blood work and I said, Joshua, I see some concerns here. I think you might need to start eating some meat. And he said, I can't do that. I'm a vegan, And so we left it. And, a year, 2 years pass, and we remain friendly. And he starts saying, Phil, I'm not feeling all that great. Maybe you could take another look at my blood work. And I do. And I say, Joshua, I think you need to start eating meat. He says, can't do it. I'm a vegan, and all the stuff. Right. And so it goes on another year or two, and now he's at the crisis point. And I say, Joshua, you need to start eating meat. And to his credit, he does. And amazing transformation in his health. And again, it's something I've seen over and over again. And so Joshua's story is very prominent in Stay Off My Kitchen Table now, because he underwent that transformation. And he's not the only one. I think in the book we talk about 2 or 3 other people that I know that are like that, and we see this a lot. And that ultimately is what brought me to that conclusion of meat is medicine, because it is not only not harmful, it is essential to our health.
So if you've got a message for free on every billboard, that's what you'd go with.
I'd go with meat is medicine these days.
I think it's really smart, because you have to, I'm not saying you don't believe that literally, but people aren't expecting to hear that. They're expecting to hear, hey, it's not as bad as we were told. Or, you know what, it's an important part of a balanced diet. Or something conciliatory.
Yep.
Not medicine. Not the thing that can fix you. Not the thing that can fix your inflammation. What's more powerful, meat is medicine or sugar is poison?
Again, I tend to go with the positive, message.
How about I'm positive sugar is poison?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. I look at it as let's give people what they need, right? So that they can feel healthy. And ultimately, all this other stuff, right? The reason that we're all addicted to sugar and we have all this processed food is because we stopped eating the good stuff. Right. And we see this again, even zooming out on the evolutionary level. We see this when we went from primarily carnivorous diets. Right. And we became domesticated and we, started the agricultural era. What we see is our brain size has shrunk. Our height has shrunk during that time. You can look at our teeth, the structure of our jaws and our teeth, and that's become problematic.
Crowded.
And crowded and,
Long.
all these problems, right, that never existed before came. And again, getting back to heart disease, because that's what I always come back to, right? We have decreased our consumption of red meat about 40% in the United States between 1940 and today, and heart disease has gotten worse. So how could meat possibly be the cause of heart disease if the problem gets worse when the supposed cause, we're eating less and less of it?
How much of what is wrong with your profession broadly can be attributed to this tendency to paint with such a broad brush? It just seems like people are pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And, really very complicated. We're all individuals. But this idea that there's a guidebook and guidelines, it seems like once those guidelines get articulated or written down and then disseminated and then collated and then, put in a binder and now they're on your desk and now it's, and then what should doctors be doing? Because someone just sat there a couple weeks ago, talked about the exact same problem with education. Like the idea that a teacher could stand in front of 40 people and we would expect somehow for all those 40 individuals to learn at the same rate. It's so preposterous on its face.
Yep.
A third of them are bored because they already figured it out. Another third are confused because they don't have a clue. And the ones that are tagging along are probably, lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
It just feels to me like that exact thing has happened in medicine.
Yeah, you're right. The movement of what we call evidence-based medicine that I talked about earlier, that just follow the guidelines, right? Being a good doctor is just following the guidelines, and the more that you're able to check the box, the patient walks in, their blood cholesterol is high, I write the prescription, and that's what is defined as being a good doctor these days. And it is a big problem. We need to get back to that individualized medicine. We need to understand that at a population level, yes, you can look at the fact that if you bring people's cholesterol level down, you make a little bit of progress against heart disease. But that is a lot different than saying that every patient that walks in front of me with high cholesterol is a problem. Because again, we miss what are the other factors that are going on there.
Again, every discipline is subject to this. Like there was an economist who just sat here,
Yeah.
Nick Eberstadt.
Nick Eberstadt.
We're talking about unemployment, right? The unemployment numbers.
Yeah.
He said, "Who gives a shit?" Like, what do you mean? He goes, like, "Who cares? Who cares how many people are unemployed? That doesn't tell you anything." That's an artifact of the Great Depression. At a time when you could treat unemployment by creating jobs that didn't exist. Now we live in a time when millions of jobs exist, but people are unemployed, so you can see it's not the lack of jobs that's causing the unemployment. Like, oh, of course,
Yeah.
I can track that. And yet, I guarantee you, on CNBC right now, somebody's talking about unemployment and what it means as if it's still 1932. I just don't know how to break the spell.
Yeah, I think ultimately the way we break the spell is, again, doctors and patients coming together to take back control of health. That's what I always talk about. I say, understand that the healthcare system works great for everyone except the patient and the doctor. And, that's where we're at. So the only answer is the doctors and the patients are going to start coming back together, right? We're going to get things like the insurance companies that are in the middle, right? Think about it. The insurance companies basically get the patient pissed off at the doctor, and they get the doctor pissed off at the patient, right? And we've lost that direct relationship, right? People always laugh, but back in the day when you came into your local doctor and he or she was going to deal with whatever problem you had, and then you said, okay, what can you pay me? And maybe you gave them a chicken and a couple eggs,
sure,
or whatever it was,
yeah.
right? It worked a lot better back then.
Yeah.
And, maybe we don't have to go quite back to that. But the bottom line is that doctors and patients need to come together now and say the most important thing is that patient, is the outcome that patient is getting, with whatever condition we're trying to deal with. And let's forget about all the other crap, and let's focus on that and let that be our guide.
I mean, it's very Hippocrates?
Yep, exactly.
That's him, right? The Hippocratic
That's him.
Oath?
Yep.
I mean, that relationship you're talking about it's probably more robust between the voiceover guy who's doing the disclaimer on the pharma ad and the patient. I mean, have you seen this in your own practice? People will call and say, "Hey, I just saw this medicine. I'd never really heard of it, but I'm wondering if it's right for me." And, I just went on to ChatGPT, and it says it is. Riff on this. On the one hand, you're saying that people need to take more responsibility for their own health. And on the other hand, we're surrounded by just a sea of chattering and disparate voices and conflicting experts. How do we do the thing you say we should do without making ourselves mental?
I think a lot of it, again, comes back to that fundamental question, right? Is the patient getting better or not? Because if that becomes your North Star, right? You as a doctor or you as a patient, right? If that's our North Star, that's going to be our best path forward. And yeah, there's all this chatter out here, right? And, there's a lot more doctors out there saying that, don't listen to this idiot Ovadia. Cholesterol is the cause of heart disease. Then there are, Ovadias out there saying maybe we're wrong about this. But ultimately, again, the patients are not getting better. As a heart surgeon, right, the number one question I get, the patient is there, they're in my office or they're on the gurney, we're going to need to do surgery on you. And they say, why? I listened. I took the medicine. My cholesterol is low. I was told that was going to prevent heart disease, and yet here I am, on your operating table. Those are the types of questions that patients need to be asking more, and quite frankly, doctors need to be receptive to and asking more. Why does this keep happening if we think we have the cause? And if it does keep happening because we do what we think is the cause, maybe it's time to try something else.
What should my cholesterol be? When should somebody get a cholesterol reading and assign meaning to it?
Yeah, it might be like the unemployment number.
Yeah.
It might be completely meaningless.
Right. Well, let's talk about Chuck. You don't
Yeah.
care, right? I mean,
No.
yeah, like
No,
what's-
but I mean, it's been 2 years, I think, since we met, But my cholesterol, I think, was like 240, something like that.
and your doctor,
yeah.
concerned, not concerned?
Oh, yeah, very concerned. Was like, you need to be on a statin. And I was on a statin before, seeing Dr. Ovadia. And I noticed muscle soreness, little brain fog. There were other stuff. I didn't realize, no one ever told me that this could be a side effect of a statin until I spoke with Dr. Ovadia. So, and then I was like, well, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And I have, and the muscles went away.
What do you mean the muscles went away?
Oh, not the muscles. The muscle aches went away. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's working great.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, so the moral of your story is you still have the prescription for the statins in your medicine
Yeah,
cabinet.
from like 2 years ago. Yeah, it's sitting in my drawer. I went through my drawer and found those, and I was like, oh, look at that. I'll look on the date and see exactly when it was because
the stakes are high.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mortal stakes.
Yeah.
For people all over the place, they're scared.
Yeah. And to empower the people, right? And again, that's something I believe very much in. When your doctor is telling you about your cholesterol level, the question I want people to ask their doctor is, am I insulin resistant? Am I insulin resistant? 4 words, right? Nice and easy.
Yeah.
Just ask them that.
What should the response be from a doc who has his or her head screwed on straight?
Well, the response should be, we've tested you for this and you are or you aren't, right? But the reality is 99% of the time, the doc's going to say, I don't know. We didn't test you for that. I may not even know what that is. Let me go back to like I had to do, right? Go back to my medical textbook and say, I know I heard this term, but what is it? How do I test for it? How do I manage it?
How do you test it?
Right.
Like, what's the test I should ask for?
If you're going to get one simple test, it is a fasting insulin level. So when you get your blood work done, they've checked your sugar level, right? They've checked your cholesterol levels, but they haven't tested your insulin level. And that's the start of how we can figure out if you're insulin resistant. Because that makes a big difference as to, is my cholesterol problematic or not? Because the reality is if you're not insulin resistant, your cholesterol can be quite high and it's not going to be a problem because it's good quality cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other part of this conversation that we miss. We measure quantity of cholesterol. We don't measure quality of cholesterol.
What does cholesterol do in my brain that's important?
Well, your brain is cholesterol. It's like 70% cholesterol. Cholesterol makes up the structure of our cells. More importantly, right, in terms of the functions of cholesterol, it's part of your immune system, your hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, vitamin D. These all get made from cholesterol. So again, this concept that cholesterol is just in our bodies to kill us, right? And therefore, we need to drive the level down to as close to zero as we can get it. It makes no sense. Why would our bodies even start making this substance that ultimately is trying to kill us? And those basic questions don't get asked enough. Why is cholesterol in my body? What are some of the good things that it was doing? And what can I do to make sure that it's doing all that good stuff without doing this bad stuff that we're worried about? And that all brings us back to metabolic health, insulin resistance. These are just the basic, biochemical processes that come up over and over again. When
We
you
have to get those right.
really start asking about what is causing heart disease.
It just there just seem to be some fundamentals we must get right, or nothing else is going to add up. Like, is vitamin D even a vitamin?
No, it's actually a hormone, technically.
I thought so.
Yep.
How did that happen? That's like Pluto.
Yeah.
It's
Is it a planet? Maybe it's not.
No,
right? Yeah.
no, it's not. Like,
Yeah.
it's still there, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But why would a hormone be classified as a vitamin?
Yeah.
Why would somebody make that decision?
Yeah, it's just one of those things that we misunderstood what we were looking at, and then as stuff gets better, as our ability to figure out what things are doing in our body gets better, and the science evolves, and just no one ever really goes back and corrects the mistake.
What other corrections are worth ruminating on? I mean, if we're that wrong about cholesterol, right? Like maybe sunlight, maybe vitamin D, maybe it just seemed like we went through this phase of skin cancer.
It's a big one.
I mean, look, you got a naturally ruddy glow here living down in Florida.
Yep.
I love the sun.
Rarely have ever put on sunscreen anymore and get out in the sun as much as possible. And one of the, one thing I hear often from people, right? When you stop eating processed food, vegetable and seed oils, you don't get sunburned anymore. Turns out that sunburn is these, what we call the polyunsaturated fatty acids, these adulterated fats that are in, all the processed food, in these vegetable and seed oils. When they get in the fat cells under your skin, and now the sun hits them and they get oxidized.
They fry.
And they fry. And that's why you become sunburned. And that's why you probably get skin cancer down the line. And it turns out you get all those things out of it, and you shouldn't be fearing the sun. You don't have to fear the sun. The sun is another great example of something we've demonized. And yet, again, we evolved as human beings in the sun. How could it possibly be, right? Whether you believe in, again, evolution or creation, right? How could it have possibly gotten to a point that this thing that literally gave us life is harming us?
Well, for a while there, it was because there was this other thing called ozone, and then there was a hole in the ozone layer, and then we weren't being protected from the sun the way we normally were. But now the hole's closed.
And don't forget to blame the cows for causing the hole.
Well, the cows
in
are
the
farting
system,
like
right?
crazy.
So that's why we
that's
need to get rid of all meat because
the cows are gassy.
Yeah.
God.
How deep in the rabbit hole do you want to go? 'Cause
I mean, I want people to hang on to a couple things. Meat is medicine, in your opinion. The sun is not your enemy. Would you call it the polyunsaturated fats that get under the subcutaneous layer of your skin? That's actually the thing that's interacting with the ultraviolet rays that's causing your skin to burn. Fascinating. Well, do you remember, I guess margarine's nowhere on your good list, right?
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Margarine, again, like you said earlier, right? What killed more people, sugar or fentanyl?
Yeah.
You can put margarine on that list as well. That was again, just, and again, it all comes from, the natural fat, that's got to be bad, so we can do better.
Yeah.
Right? This is one of the other things you start to see.
What is
right?
margarine, really? People used to say it was just plant fat, but what is that?
It's a manipulated plant fat, right? It's, the vegetable and seed oils broadly are industrial fats, right? These were lubricants for machinery. These were the things that we used to make candles out of, right? And when the candle industry started going away because we had this thing called the light bulb, someone said, well, what else can we do with this?
Let's eat it.
Let's eat it. No, I mean, it sounds
Slap it on bread.
but it is
Jesus.
true. Can we detoxify this enough that it doesn't immediately kill us when we eat it? And, there we go.
And here are your guidelines, and here's an acronym that says it's good, and the next thing you know...
And oh, by the way, it lowers your cholesterol.
Lowers my cholesterol.
So let's put the heart disease stamp of approval on it and tell people this is, how to fix heart disease, when in fact it makes the problem worse.
And don't forget my favorite part. Let's market it. I know. I can't believe it's not butter. I can't believe it.
Exactly.
Well, it's not.
Can you believe it's petroleum?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, key bono, right? Who benefits most from seed oils? Who benefits most? God, I've got friends in the sugar industry. I've worked on a sugar plantation. These are good people. There are many, many jobs. They're providing for their families. It's a free market. It's some candy corn, everything in moderation, all of it. You know, I think you made a really good point before. It's hard to say. You can't walk it back to some real conspiratorial classic villain twirling his mustache in the corner laughing maniacally at the ruse he's pulled off. It's so much more complicated, and there's so many other well-intended or at least not nefarious people who are going along for some ride, and they're nice people. Maybe they're in the Kiwanis Club and they volunteer at their church and they're raising their kids. And yeah, they work down at the Captain Crunch factory or whatever it is. It's going to be really hard to pull this thread out of the fabric of the society we've built for ourselves without wrecking the garment.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, we, again, are at the point where, you know, some large institutions need to be wrecked, right? There's going to be some tears in the fabric of society. You know, again, we don't have a choice. Because we keep going this way, understand, right, that society is literally collapsing under its own weight, right? We are going bankrupt as a country trying to take care of the sick people. We don't have enough healthy young people to serve in our military, right? We're seeing all these things. I am seeing 30-year-olds end up on my operating table, you know? And again, going back to all of this, right? What has been most noticeable to me in my 25-year career as a heart surgeon, it's that I used to operate on 70 and 80-year-olds, some 60-year-olds, the 50-year-olds were rare. Today, I routinely operate on 40-year-olds, and it's not that unusual that I have a 30-year-old on my operating table these days. And so you say, that's the unsustainable path. Keep following that, and we are literally headed to the destruction of our society. So the way I look at it these days is we don't have a choice but to change course because, you know, we're on the Titanic, and there's the iceberg.
Right ahead.
And we're headed right towards it.
How do the books differ? Because I see similar food groups on the covers of both.
Yeah, that is consistent. So stay off my operating table. That was the blueprint. That was the plan. You know, this is what you're going to do to stay off my operating table. Stay off my kitchen table. We go a little deeper into why. And we talk about those things like nutrient density, bioavailability, that really starts to inform people as they're trying to build their system.
Yeah.
Right. I'm all about the systems, and let's build the system. Let's give you the basic plan. Let's give you some recipes, but let's talk about why these are the foods that should stay, and these are the foods that should come off your kitchen table. So ultimately, you can stay off my operating table.
How big a problem is money for your average patient or just the average person? Like if to embrace the foods that you're recommending? Yeah, food deserts, just the availability of the slop.
Yep.
Versus like how smart do I need to become?
Well, again, you know, it's how do you look at the money, right? Because eating that cheap, ultra-processed, available food, it's going to cost you more in the long run, right? Yes, meat is a little bit more expensive than that stuff. But it turns out, first of all, when you're eating mostly meat, you end up eating less. You're less hungry all the time.
You're satiated.
You're satiated. You're getting the nutrient density, right? So if we equated how much does this cost per nutrient, essentially, you're going to find out that meat is a lot cheaper. And that doesn't even take into account that if you don't develop the diabetes 10 years from now, right, how much is that going to cost you? How much is it going to cost you when you have the heart attack? So when we start thinking about food in that context, eating meat becomes very cheap, very affordable, and people can do this. You know, there is... when you get into the, my community, right, and people start talking about meat, right, and they start talking about, oh, well, optimal is the, regeneratively raised, grass-finished, beef, and, that's expensive.
Yeah.
But I know people that literally, they go to Walmart, and they buy the 10-pound tube of the cheapest ground beef that they can find,
Yeah.
and they eat that, and they eat only that over a week, right? And their food cost has gone down dramatically, and they are getting much healthier. You can actually go to the fast food place and you can say, give me, 2, 3, 4 burger patties, nothing else. I don't want the bun. I don't want the topping. I don't want the fries. I don't want the soda. And that's going to be your food for the day. And I know people that do it and they get healthier. So you can do this affordably, in the short term. And then you have to start thinking about how much more affordable it actually is in the long term, because you're going to be healthy.
What did it feel like for you? Not to lose 100, because I can kind of imagine that, but I lost 40 and put back 10. I kind of want to be around 200 now. My body just, that's not true.
You want to be 180.
Well, I want to be 185. But given the way I eat now, I didn't go full keto, but I took the carbs out. I eliminated desserts. I didn't cut the booze out, but I cut back on the wine and was just, a vodka here and there, whatever, but it's like a magic trick.
Yeah.
Like when the first 20 pounds come off and all of a sudden you're not hungry anymore. That is, I think I was probably in ketosis for a couple months, maybe, maybe. And I haven't been in a while, but I know I can get back to it. And, how much of what you're doing, is this just another sort of keto diet, or is it broader?
Low carb, I guess is the best umbrella term for all of this. And a carnivore diet, right? That you're eating mostly meat or only meat. It's a version of that. And it all can work. Ultimately what I tell people is the first rule is eat real food. And then the second rule is the more insulin resistant, the more metabolically unhealthy you are, the less your body can tolerate carbohydrates. So let's start reducing the carbohydrates. And those are kind of the simple concepts that I get people started on. And then, like I said, I tell them meat is medicine. You can eat as much meat as you want. And if you give people that simple framework, they'll find their way. And some people, they're like full-on carnivore and the only thing they eat is meat. And other people are more, on the low-carb keto kind of spectrum. But it all ends up working for the most part. And there are certain situations where you might lean more one towards the other. And then I'm also honest with people, again, this isn't a linear thing, right? My weight has gone up and down some over the years since I lost all the weight, but I can get back to, what I need to do. And I think we are on a path forward now where we at least have those long-term, the solutions that will work long-term for people, and we can really get on top of all of this.
Should I be fasting?
If you want. I mentioned it earlier. When you eat a lot of meat, you're hungry less often.
Well, you also mentioned with regard to the insulin test, and I want to make sure people really understand this, because I want people to ask their doctors that question.
Yeah.
But you put the word fasting in front of it.
Yeah.
Explain.
So in that sense, we want to know your insulin level when you haven't eaten for about 8 to 12 hours. Now, most people should have a period in their life where they don't eat for 8 to 12 hours, but a lot of people
it's called
don't.
nighttime.
Right? Yeah, it's called sleeping. Right? If you sleep for the 8 hours and you don't eat for an hour before or 2 hours before, and you don't eat for 2 hours after, that's what we're going after. But understand, a lot of people can't even do that. So in that sense, we want to get a sense of, you haven't eaten for 8 hours. What is your insulin level? So that's kind of when we talk about fasting blood work, that's what we're talking about. Now, when most people say, should I fast, right? Should I work fasting into my dietary strategy? My answer is, yeah, it's good not to eat as often. And there are some real shocking studies around this, right? When they actually look at how often people consume calories these days, whether they're drinking or eating it, the average person, I think, is somewhere between 12 and 16 times per day. Right. So again, if you're asleep for 8 hours,
it just never
right,
stops.
Every hour, you're getting something in, and it becomes another problem. Because again, when we go back to, ancestrally, and we killed the beast and we ate, right? And then we didn't eat again for a while. Okay, so your insulin level might go up a little bit after you eat, but then it comes down and it stays down. And again, most people today, they're constantly eating, so it's always up. It starts to come down a little bit, it goes back up again, and we need that fasting insulin level to come down to the baseline it's supposed to be. And so that's the reason that the fasting insulin blood test is so informative, because we can see, okay, you haven't eaten for 8 hours. If your insulin level is still elevated, you're in trouble.
Okay, so I ask my doctor, am I insulin resistant? I say to my doctor, I'd really like a CAC, I think it was?
Coronary artery calcium, yep, CAC scan.
Anything else?
Those are the two big ones. If we did that at every doctor's visit, I think we would make a massive impact on heart disease. Because again, it's going to lead to all these other conversations. Does my cholesterol matter? What's actually happening with the plaque in my arteries? What can I do about that? But if we just started at those two places, and maybe the third one I would put is, am I inflamed? Do I have inflammation? Another simple blood test called CRP, C-reactive protein. So throw that in. And again, we're not talking like expensive tests. A fasting insulin level and a CRP, probably $30, maybe $40 if you go pay cash for yourself. And this is something else I want patients to understand. If your doctor says, I can't do that, I don't know what it is, I'm not going to order it for you, say, great. Go home, get on your computer, many websites that you can do this at. I'll put a plug for one of my friends, ownyourlabs.com. And I believe those two tests combined are going to be somewhere around $40. Do it once or twice a year. Spend the $100 on the coronary calcium scan, and you're going to vastly improve your health.
Tell me about your practice. Are you anchored at a particular hospital? How much of it is long distance? I mean, you and Chuck are 3,000 miles apart. How many of your patients are out of state?
So I have a dual professional life. I'm still an active heart surgeon. And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, there's a shortage of heart surgeons in this country. So I contract with hospitals that are in need of heart surgery services, and I travel to them and I take care of the patients there that need their heart surgery done. So that's my heart surgery practice. I have my preventative practice that is all telemedicine. It is nationwide. I have gone through the insane process of becoming licensed in all 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. Yes, I don't recommend it, not for the faint of heart. And I have a team. I have a nurse practitioner. She's also licensed in all 50 states. I have amazing health coaches, and we have a nationwide telemedicine practice. So we can see patients wherever they are. It's all done via telemedicine. We can find the testing that you need, go get your labs done locally, go get your coronary calcium scan done locally, and we do everything over telemedicine. So nationwide, all telemedicine. It's another outside the box approach to how we can start to solve these problems.
Yeah, because inside the box ain't working. Not for a lot of people. I ask about fasting because my friend in Baltimore, who really credits you with saving her life, told me the other day that she fasts twice a week. She'll go 24 hours twice a week. I think it was Mondays and Fridays. She just zero. And it may have even been more than that. I think she was going 48 hours at a time. Yep. But she had that slap in the face. I mean, it was so shocking for her to be told that her heart was just in terrible, terrible trouble. So she wound up on somebody's operating table, and then I guess came to you after that.
Right.
Because your answer to should I fast is maybe, if you want to.
No, it turns out that fasting can be a great tool to utilize. It's one of the things I put in the tool belt. And when people are dealing with significant insulin resistance, it can be a way to sort of accelerate the process. You start eating less carbohydrates, and then you start eating carbohydrates less often. And, if we can get people to the point that they're doing 24, 48, 72-hour fast, even beyond that. I personally have done a 7-day fast. It's not needed for everyone, but it can be a great tool. And it's something we work in, but it's not something that I want to tell everyone that, you need to be doing this. We probably do all need to be doing what's called now intermittent fasting, right? So we said we eat 16 times a day. What if we only ate twice a day, right? And what if those twice were within, let's say, an 8 or a 10-hour window during your day, so that you have 14 or 16 hours that you've not eaten during that day? That's a great way to start to improve things like insulin resistance.
How did we get so frightened of feeling hungry? Not being hungry.
Yeah.
Because most people listening to this have never actually been hungry. But we've all said, and this goes to language too, which I think is so powerful, but metaphorically, how many people have said, I'm famished, I'm starving.
Right.
No, you're not. You're not.
Yeah.
After 7 days, I might imagine that feeling. How do I know if I'm hungry or just feeling hungry?
Yeah. Most of the time the answer, like you said, is you're just feeling hungry, right? So I always tell people some simple things, right? You think you're hungry, go take a 10-minute walk outside and come back in and decide if you're still hungry. Drink a glass of water, and come back 10 minutes later and decide if you're actually hungry. Or, a lot of times we're just bored. Again, we're addicted, right? The sugar itself is addictive. The carbohydrates are addictive. We're programmed, right? Because the constant ads on TV. And, a lot of us have built our whole social structure around eating. And listen, I'm all about community, right? We talked about sun, right? Community is another pillar of health. But maybe it doesn't always need to be about eating, right? Maybe we can just hang out and we don't have to eat.
Yeah.
And just enjoy each other's company. Not something we do in society anymore. So you're right. We've built a lot of social structure around eating, and we've become programmed that we need to eat all the time. And the reality is we don't. And, and then we can also just start making some better choices when we do decide to eat. And like I said, it doesn't become a struggle. This is what I think most surprises people when they start doing this, right? Because you say to them something like, you're going to eat less often, you're going to fast. And they're like, oh, I can't do that, right? But when we start with just, sit down, right? The average person, sit down and eat, let's say, half a pound of meat, right? Take some ground beef, cook it up, eat half a pound, and then see when you're hungry again. Mm-hmm. And the answer is it's going to be a lot longer than you think it is, right? It's going to be a lot longer than, people always argue, well, it's just about the calories, right? If you take the caloric equivalent of a half pound of beef, right, and you eat that as a Twinkie, right, a cupcake, when are you going to be hungry again? Immediately. Right. You didn't stop being hungry because you didn't get any nutrients out of that Twinkie. But the half pound of beef, you got a lot of nutrients out of, and you're going to be hungry a lot less often.
See, my problem is if you so you eat the half a pound of meat, but you also have half the baked potato, right? And maybe you have some of the beans.
Yeah.
And then, you don't want to be rude. You're with friends and somebody sent over a slice of cake right? And so now you have all of it and you go home thinking, you know what? I mean, everything in moderation, but I had the important stuff. I had my half pound of meat. But now I screwed it up, didn't I?
Well,
I poisoned it.
This is something else we talk about in the book, right? A lot of these plant products have what we call anti-nutrients in them, right? So you're eating, right, what you think is, it's a vegetable. It's healthy, right? Can't possibly be harming you. And you don't realize that it has chemicals in it that actually block the absorption of the nutrients. So those nutrients that were in the ground beef, right, that if you ate it alone, you get all of them. If you start mixing in some of this other stuff, now you don't get as many nutrients out of that ground beef. And, oh, by the way, all these nutrients that we were told are in these vegetables that are so essential to our health, we're not getting those either, because we can't actually process those, and we got all these anti-nutrients. So this is something else, and it's hard, right? People are like, no, that can't be true.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's true. Just stick with the meat. It's the most nutrient dense. It's the most bioavailable to us.
Here's some questions from AI. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
As a heart surgeon, what was the most common lie patients told themselves before they landed on your operating table?
The most common lie that patients told themselves is that they don't have control over why they ended up on the operating table.
Deference of responsibility.
Yeah.
Act of God.
Yeah.
Not my fault.
And it's a lot of that comes from the medical system, right?
Yeah.
Again, the medical system tells people, you can't fix this, only we can fix this.
Yeah, or
right?
maybe
But-
maybe the magic medicine.
Yeah, exactly. And patients come to believe that.
If you could install one warning light on the human body, like the check engine light in a truck, what would it measure?
It would measure nutrients, ultimately. That's why we eat. And, if we were able to see our level, right, and see how the different foods that we're eating are affecting those levels, that would probably be the one that I would put on there.
And where on the body would you put this light, just aesthetically, so I can understand what this might look
Yeah,
like?
it needs to be like burned in
Like-
the back
like-
of your eyeball, right? So you can't avoid looking at it, because you know what you do with the check engine light, right?
I hit OK
Yeah,
off.
right,
Change
right.
oil. Not today.
Yeah, exactly.
Not today.
Get out the duct tape to cover it with.
What's the healthiest thing you've ever seen someone do that had nothing to do with diet or exercise?
I would go back to get out in the sun for that one.
Or sleep?
Sleep is a good one as well. But yeah, ultimately I talk about the 4 pillars, right? Which are what we eat, what we do, how we sleep, and, sun. Those are probably our 4 pillars of health.
Sun is one of the pillars. That's
Well, look, this is going to blow your mind, Chuck, but new idea. Sleep in the sun.
what?
Sleep in the sun.
Wow.
Sleep in the sun,
That's like, get that hammock out.
cook your meat in the sun. That's how we're going to do it.
Suppose insurance companies only paid for treatments that improved health 10 years from now. How would medicine change overnight?
Yeah, I think the doctors would be a lot happier and the patients would be a lot happier.
We're not big on the delayed gratification thing.
Well, and yeah, incentives, right? It always comes back to the incentives. And we got to realize that the insurance companies are not incentivized to keep people healthy. That's a whole nother, we might have to save that for episode 2, but it's another kind of interesting aspect of all this.
Dude, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
That's the thing about what you do. It just touches everything. Everything.
Yeah.
What belief, this is great. What belief about health did you hold with complete confidence 20 years ago that now makes you absolutely cringe?
Yeah, cholesterol is the cause of heart disease. I mean, that's the big one.
Yeah.
And of course, I look back and say, how did I fall for that? But again, it helps me understand how everyone else has fallen for it and how we start to undo that lie.
It's the way we fall for everything. There's a little frog in the boiling water. And then there's, a guy, I love Todd Rose. You would really enjoy that. He wrote a book called Collective Illusions.
Okay.
And he runs a think tank up in Boston called Populous. And he sat right there not long ago and told me that in his estimation, the greatest threat to our country was the manufactured consensus. Not just a consensus. That's dangerous enough if it's wrong. But the ability now to deliberately manufacture, but it's how you get a mob, it's how you get certainty. And so, I've talked to senators and all kinds of people in power lately who keep coming back to what China's doing with social media to influence our feelings toward data centers, toward AI, toward any number of things.
Yeah.
And when I listen to this conversation later, I'm going to be struck by the whole villain thing in the narrative. Like, where's the China in this whole crazy story about turning cholesterol into the villain? Who did that? And I think we've already talked about it. It's probably not one person, but just this unholy cabal of interests.
The person who gets brought up most commonly as maybe the one person that got us down this, on this path, his name was Ancel Keys. He was a physiologist, a scientist, 1950s. So President Eisenhower has a heart attack while he's in office, right? And Ancel Keys had started promoting this theory of cholesterol, saturated fat being the primary driver of heart disease. And Ancel Keys had enough influence that he wasn't a doctor, but he kind of influenced the doctors taking care of Eisenhower. He ended up becoming a prominent figure in the American Heart Association, which was an early kind of fledgling organization, but rises to prominence. And Ancel Keys is who a lot of people trace this back to. And Ancel Keys had done a very famous study in the history of, connecting saturated fat and dietary cholesterol to heart disease. It was called the 7 Countries Study. And there's a famous figure where he lines up the amount of saturated fat that countries consumed and their incidence of heart disease, right? And it's a straight line. It looks perfect. What was later discovered is Ancel Keys had data from 21 countries and handpicked the 7 countries that fit on the line. And he didn't put in France, for instance, which had the highest consumption of saturated fat and the lowest incidence of heart disease around the time, right? And it became known later as the French paradox. How come they don't follow this rule? And, though there are examples like that, but, that's one of the most prominent examples. And when you ask most people, who started this whole cholesterol myth, Ancel Keys is the name that comes up over and over again.
Well,
he's in Vinny's
him.
movie.
Yeah.
There's a big thing about him.
In the first one, I think.
So his movie, Fat, a documentary. Another great resource on this, Nina Teicholz. She wrote a great book called The Big Fat Lie that goes into this whole history about how we got here. And, that's, as a physician, that's kind of one of the things that's been fascinating to me about all of this. Like,
what about breakfast,
how did
man?
we get here?
Where do you put breakfast? And I mean, just from a marketing, the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
Is it really?
A marketing slogan. That's where that came from. Developed by the Kellogg's Corporation, right? To sell their breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
And so, breakfast is, it's an interesting discussion these days, right? Because on the one hand, you say, okay, you're not going to eat for 16 hours, right? So that means that you ate dinner and then you eat lunch for a lot of people, and you don't eat breakfast. It's certainly not the most important meal of the day. If you are going to eat it, it's also a great opportunity. Eggs and meat, bacon and eggs, right? Steak and eggs. Great, that's a great breakfast, and you're not going to be hungry again until dinner, right? So I go back and forth on breakfast. A lot of days I end up just not eating it because, again, I'm not hungry when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
But if I am going to eat it, it's one of the easier meals, right? You just have to skip the toast, and
That's it.
You don't want that cereal. And so
it's also a great rumination on on dedication, the whole bacon and eggs routine. How'd that go? The bacon and eggs, the chicken was committed. The pig was dedicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, man, we're in desperate need of a guide, a docent, somebody, to navigate us through. And those are the people that I'm most interested in talking to. And, when I find somebody like that who's also on a mission, who has spoken the truth to their own tribe, I think it's really important, and I think, I find it hugely important that you lost 100 pounds. And I think a lot of other people do too. And I think many other people will minimize that. But I just, in times like these, we want people who walk the walk. And I think you got just a great story to tell. And I hope it reaches more people. Because now I got Chuck. My dad is going to get this book. And my friend in Baltimore. It's and Vinny.
Yeah.
I really had no choice. You just wore me down.
We finally circled the wagons, and but I appreciate you having me on. I think this is a very important message that we just need to get out to more people. And this is ultimately, it's going to be a grassroots movement that gets this done.
Well, Stay Off is the theme. Stay Off My Operating Table is the first book. Stay Off My Kitchen Table is the second. And is there a place where people can go who just want to keep up with what you're doing? Or maybe, I don't know, are you taking patients?
Yeah, so the practice is actively taking patients. iFix Hearts is where you can find me everywhere, all the social media. ifixhearts.com will bring you to, if you're interested in the practice, you can go there and learn more.
I'm going to do that. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for making the trip.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, adios.
Like us and subscribe before